The word war room came from a waiter that used to work at a game reserve we had in Africa. About 7 or 8 years ago, he died of AIDS, and he left a very moving poem which I read, and he talked about AIDS is not a disease, but it is a war that is on Africa. And he was very angry with his government for not realizing that it was a war that was on Africa. And so, because of his death, we pledged that we would lose nobody ever again at any Virgin company. And we introduced something called the zero campaign. And the zero campaign was that we would try to make sure that none of our staff died of AIDS or ever went from HIV to AIDS, that none of our staff would transmit HIV to their children, and that none of our staff who were not HIV positive would become HIV positive. And we launched a very big campaign, and then tried to get other companies to do the same. The thing that really shook me up, a bit like Annie, was visiting the hospitals, and the hospitals in open inverted commas, which were basically just places where people went to die, and just rows and rows of dying people. And then the waiting rooms just full of people who were waiting to go into the beds of the people who died the night before. And no antiretroviral drugs, no testing, nothing. I mean, that was going back 4 or 5 years. Things have improved. They've still got a long way to go. My principal interest for the elders was on the conflict resolution side, on the basis that if you don't have peace in a country, nothing else can exist. Education falls apart. The hospitals fall apart. Tourism falls apart. Everything falls apart. And so, if one could get the 12 people in the world who the world could see that were the right candidates with the greatest moral authority in the world, the greatest that had the greatest respect of the global community, hopefully reasonably well gender-based and reasonably well geographically based as well, that those people would have the chance of moving in and resolving conflict. Mary Robinson, who was one of the elders, talked about the visit to Darfur, and Randy, who's one of the founders, who's here today, just saying it's absolutely essential that the elders go back there soon, and they've got to keep going back there until Darfur goes off the, well, it's already out of the news, sadly, but till it goes out of the news for the right reasons, and that North and South Sudan have sorted out their differences, and Darfur's peaceful once again. Well, we were in the street, and he wanted to talk to Darfurians who had been displaced, and the only people who were put up to talk to the elders were people who'd actually lived in this region for generations, and they were refusing to let us see them. So he wasn't going to take no for an answer. And there was a machine gun or two that was levied in his direction. And at that time, I thought maybe I should try to intervene and let it get a little bit of peace and calm and compromising going on. But anyway, he got his way, and we saw the Darfurians, and as best they could, they talked about their plight. But I mean, every other man there, I'm afraid, was a plainclothes, and so they were pretty frightened of talking. So there was a danger of us putting these people in peril if we pushed the point too hard, I think.